Second. All right, we're live right now. Hey, for anyone watching, hey, welcome to Mission Critical Podcast, also known as Centerline Systems. Hey, we're going to do our first class tonight, and I'm going to go around and introduce everybody in a second and set some ground rules. But I just wanted to start off just saying, hey, this is new. We're not paid advocates or shills. We're just a bunch of guys. And if you're over on Mission Critical and you watch some of the podcasts there, I think we're just all concerned individuals. And, you know, Jeremy and I, through our personal conversations, this, is how Mission Critical podcast, developed. We just had this need to want to give something back. Our guest tonight, Paul, if you've been over at Mission Critical, you've seen him a couple times now. He's going to join us and assist and provide his words of wisdom here tonight. And if anyone is watching this, live, thank you very much. We got Big Spoon in the ready room on doing the moderator thing. But tonight's podcast, well, here, actually, why don't you guys just take a second and just go around and say hello, Paul, Redbeard, introduce yourself, just say what you want to say briefly. If everybody wants the detailed accounts of who we are, go see some of the Mission Critical podcasts. Mm-hmm. But for anyone over here on Centerline Systems, if you've never seen any of that, then let's just give them a quick little who we are, guys.
Paul, you want to take it first?
Sure. My name is Paul, and I'm part of the Mission Critical podcast. At least, I've been starting with being a Boy Scout as a younger man or boy, I guess at that point. I've been interested in the outdoors and survival, and we're talking about bug out bags here, so it's been close to me for quite a while, and my day job, I spend doing information security, which can tie into this, in some areas, and we'll discuss that later. But so this is right in my wheelhouse. I really enjoy this.
Sweet. Redbeard, peaceful, not harmless.
Yeah. So most of you who have followed kind of the work that we've done, you guys have a pretty good idea of me. For those of you who don't know who I am also Mark's wonderful co-host. We run this crazy train together. I have a background in some bushcrafting. I like to do a lot of tactical training, a lot of gun stuff. I do a little bit of gunsmithing here and there, but I really kind of dabble in a lot of the outdoor stuff. And I also have a background in both like constitutional and liberty oriented stuff. So I can provide some opinions across the spectrum for all the videos that we do. But for this, it really kind of hits home because there's a lot of things that I've taken interest in pertaining to, the more tactical or strategic side, as well as being able to understand the gear that you're using and how that pertains to our everyday lives and as it pertains to different situations. So.
And hey, if you're tuning in and if you're thinking this was going to be like a totally like some type of like at your place of work PowerPoint presentation, it's not going to be that. This is going to be very interactive, and I'm going to demonstrate it because Redbeard, Paul and I haven't seen him with our eyes since our last podcast, and Redbeard did something crazy to his beard, and I'm not sure. Yeah. He cut like it in half. It used to be down.
Hey, no, all this was, Mark, it was just to show people that we are real people. We're not bots. We're not AI generated. So this is real world.
That's exactly what an AI generated bot would say. Moving on so we can actually do the class. So I'm Mark, small business owner over at Centerline Systems, Redbeard, Paul, and some other really good, great human beings, helping us out over on Mission Critical Podcast. Talking about a wide variety of subjects. Prior to me starting Centerline Systems, I was in the CIA, was an operations officer. I put my pants on like everybody else. And for somebody right now who's saying, oh, he used to be from the, one of the alphabet agencies, that doesn't make me a traitor. I don't know. I've been called like, well, you're a traitor. I'm like, I don't get that commentary. And then on top of that, 22 years in the military, in the infantry. And that's it. And then I grew up in northern Minnesota, and as you can imagine from my life that I've led, military, the agency, overseas, and then just as kids growing up, I think I was like 13 or 14 and, was already out on motorbikes. If I saw a grouse on one of the trails, we'd shoot it, kill it, and make a fire and eat it right there and then go motorbiking. So this is kind of like, just like Jeremy said, and I think like so many other people, you don't necessarily have to have some type of specific training or background for these type of ideas or these issues or these skill sets to be a part of who you are. I mean, I think that's just something that everybody can bring to the table in life. So without further ado, unless you guys got some further ado, do you guys, anybody else got any further ado?
Well, let's swing right into it.
Okay, let's jump right into it. This is the format we're going to use for most of this, everybody, tonight. And by the way, before I go into it, let me just do two other things, maybe three. So first and foremost, if you're watching this on YouTube, there is a 20 to 22 second lag time. Spoon is monitoring the comments over on YouTube. We can't see that. We're in a completely different software. But if there is a comment, it'll come over into our comment section, but at about 22 seconds late. Spoon, though, on the other hand, can see you do it in real time. We're trying to cut that down a little bit. And I just want to kind of say the rules here, if you want, for tonight. Hey, again, we're just having fun. We're trying to give something back. We're trying to teach a course. This isn't a cookie cutter, one size fits all. There is no, and you'll get this in a couple minutes. There is no one answer, or there is no one right answer. I don't think our goal actually is, and I'll just throw this out there. If you think this is going to be a super sexy, you got to have this piece of kit or that piece of kit, that is not this course. Would you guys agree or disagree with that? Have they come to the wrong place? Yeah, because none of us through our real world experiences agree with that philosophy. This is really going to be more, and hopefully it'll be a conversation, not just me talking or Paul or Redbeard, but you, right? If you're taking the time out of your busy life to be over here with us, I want to try to make this meaningful for everyone involved. So we want to try to give something back. If you've got a question or a comment, throw it out there. Spoon, he's working behind the scenes. And if you want to, we'll invite you to come over so you're a face out here asking your question or making your comment or sharing your story. If you're here watching this live, then be here. And if that's not your thing, no problem. Just leave a comment. If we get a chance, we'll address it. It all depends on how it's going to work out. But the only note on that is, if you're a troll or if you're a bag of Richards, just stop watching right now. We're all here to learn. When I taught classes, for real taught classes, I would always tell my students, how much I know? And everybody would think I was going to make some, egotistical statement. It's like, I know enough to know I don't know everything. And every class I always taught, there was always something there for me to learn, even from the most novice of student of whatever that skill is. So, if you're just going to be here to be a troll, we're just going to block you and kick you off. If you're here and you want to participate and learn and maybe help and add to the conversation so we can learn too, then you are the right person for the job. Right, guys?
Yeah. And if I can add one thing to that too, Mark.
Certainly can.
So here's, and I just kind of want to kind of go on top of what Mark was saying is, if you're looking for the one, and I come from a physical fitness background myself, but if you're looking for that one pill that's gonna fix everything, that's not how it works. You have to put in the time, put in the work, figure out what gear works for you, figure out what's going to best fulfill your needs and fulfill kind of what your mission set or your goals are, and then you'll be able to adequately use the information that hopefully that we're going to provide to you tonight, which we hope is going to be useful to the greatest extent that you possibly can. So like Mark was saying, look, this is an opportunity for even us to learn and to be able to get engaged with you guys and gals and to really bring forth really good information. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that point. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be something that's just going to be, boom, it's there and everything's fixed. It takes time and it takes practice and it takes getting out there and training with it. So,
damn right. It does. Hey, well said there, Redbeard, even though I should call you Red Half Beard, something like that. But
Mark might be a little jaded over this.
My beard is way better than yours. Somebody called me Gandalf. I mean, that's the ultimate compliment for beard owners. I got called Gandalf. So, hey, okay. So without further ado, let's move into this. And I guess, well, no, there is one further ado, which is, and ladies and gentlemen, so we have this thing, we train to standards, not to time. But if we follow that rule verbatim, we could be here for 5 or 6 hours. This class, when I first did this class, And again, Spoon and I were trying to think about it. I think I did this class 9 or 10 years ago. Redbeard, I don't know if you remember, but this is a class I created and I taught a long time ago. And I'm here to tell you, and it was designed for a smaller group, face-to-face interaction, and it was a half day or an all-day affair, right? I could do it 2 different ways. So we're not going to get through the whole slide deck here tonight. There's just no way through our conversations and hopefully, some questions and comments and additions from you guys. So there is going to be a cutoff point. So we're probably, there is no probably. We're going to do this in 2 sections. And on that note, let's just go into it right now. Paul, anything to add?
No, I'm ready to go.
Okay, let's go then, boys and girls. All right. Hopefully you're at home and you got a drink in your hand. Here we go. All right. Title of this, we already said, it's Go Bags, Gear, and Getting There, right? And you can read along. The bottom line is, and I think everybody gets this, great gear definitely makes a difference. It really does. But what I think I'm trying to propose, Paul's proposing, Jeremy, and I think many other people, but it's the mindset. I mean, people with a great mindset, a survivor mindset or a warrior mindset, MacGyver, he could make anything out of nothing, type of thing. But you do need to, Jeremy's point, you really do need to know your gear, and you have to think through what type of gear do you need for whatever your situation is. All right, here's a quick outline. Everybody can read it. This is what the overall class is going to look like. We're not going to get through all that stuff tonight, and some of it might not even make any sense to you right now, but that's all right. But this is what we're going to be covering here tonight and in the next course, the next time we do this next iteration. Oops, wrong button there. Give me a sec. There we go. All right. This class for me, when I did this, I dedicated this to Coast and a guy who will be, not named. So you can read along as I'm telling you the little background about it, because to me, if we're going to talk about go bags, the gear you need and wherever it is that you're trying to go, this stuff comes into play. Coast to me is one of the not ultimate, but it's a very clear cut example of that whole group think and lack of thinking. And, I'm too badass to ever be hurt. And there was some glaring, and I'm not casting aspersions. These were my colleagues. One of them was a very close colleague of mine and, great human beings. But unfortunately, we need to be able to just be honest and learn our lessons from our failures. And Coast to me is an example of people not taking things seriously enough, or people overlooking and not following your guiding principles or your operating. You see where I'm going with this, who just step out. And I'm sure if you think about your job, your family members, your friends, you see this type of stuff happening all the time, where people are taking stupid or unnecessary risks or thinking they're, the man of steel and they're invulnerable to anything else. But on the flip side of that coin is the picture of Mike, who through selfless sacrifice proved the ultimate thing about his warrior mindset and never giving up. And it didn't matter, whether it's a stranger or if it's, his battle buddy. There's certain things that through our mindset and our perseverance, I mean, here, for example, whenever somebody gets lost on a mountain or is out hiking and gets lost, look at how many people come together and, volunteer rescue squads or dedicated rescue squads. People go and put their lives on the line trying to find and save an innocent person, somebody they don't even know, right? That is that warrior mindset. That is that something bigger than me type of mindset. And I just wanted to throw those 2 pictures out there, because those are things that in my life I've always taken to heart and used as kind of like, my guiding star, my guiding principle, for how I could be a better person myself. So, all right. Now on this point, so no one actually hears me talking the whole time, because Redbeard and I know Paul's going to probably want to chime in this too. Just want you to take a look at this. So when we're talking about go bags, right? Whatever you want to call it, a go bag, a bug out bag, or what type of gear do I need? Again, as we said at the beginning, this isn't going to be a course on you need this, because I don't know who you are, right? And I don't know what it is you're planning for. I don't know there, and we'll get into all these other variables, but I think I'm throwing this out there because Jeremy had some pretty cool things to say when we were talking about this in the past. And then just again, recently, I always look at it, and this is just an example, so you've got to look at the probability of an event and then the consequences. And that's going to vary between people, environments, your mission. We'll get into that later. I know that's a scary military term, but everybody conducts missions all day long. You just don't call it that way. but you got to look at like, well, what's the probability of this happening? And if it does happen, what are the consequences? And Jeremy had a really good thing to say about that as this kind of thought process pertains to, well, what's a go bag in the first place? Redbeard?
Yeah, so basically, just to kind of, I think, kind of summarize what we talked about is, you and I had a conversation essentially surrounding, like, okay, first off, like, what is the environment that we're working in, right? And secondly, as it pertains to the individual, like, what is that individual dealing with on perhaps a daily basis? We brought up, the difference between a Delta guy and a soccer mom. There's obviously, two diametrically opposite things. But at the same time, I think when we evaluate how we design a bag, we have to be cognizant of what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, what the probability of a particular event is going to be, where we live. And if we can take that data or that information, we can kind of combine that together, and we can isolate and identify a few basic situations that we feel may be the most likely to apply to us. It'll give us a good start, essentially, to be able to craft a bag or a get home bag that's going to play very well with who we are as people and the given situation or environment that we're going to be in.
And I'm just going to give like an example to that to, add a little flavor, a little mustard to the sandwich. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give this over to Paul because, just one of the last times we were trying to work with Paul, he was in the middle of like some really bad storms, and it feeds into this. I live in northern Minnesota. What is it that I really need to be prepared for? And if there's a quote unquote bag that I need, is it zombie apocalypse? Is it nuclear war? Or is it a sudden blizzard, 36 inches and I'm stuck and I'm in the ditch on the way home? And I think that this slide going into it, that's what it tries to demonstrate. However, before I turn it over to Paul, I just want to point out, and Jeremy and I think Jeremy will agree with this. I don't want to speak for him, but why does it have to be just one bag? Why is it like a cookie cutter? Here's my bag. Dude, what we're trying to do here is to get you think of what are the most likely scenarios that you're going to encounter in your day-to-day grind, or what's the next probability up? Well, I don't think there's going to be a nuclear war, but there's been a lot of, civil unrest, in the country, and I live in an urban area. So that's got to, there's a little bit of a warning time with that sometimes, but that might be another very, maybe it's not unlikely and it's not highly likely, but there's a good probability. Okay. That's what we're trying to shape here is, you think about this. You might have 3 different bags that are loaded up for 3 different probabilities, each having their own set of consequences. And also, depending on that mission and a COCA, again, we'll talk about that in a second, but might have a completely different loadout per those bags.
Yep.
Paul, do you want to add anything to that, sir?
Yeah. And what I would say is directly in response to that is, what I'll have is for a minor incident, I'll have a smaller bag and then maybe a larger bag and an even larger bag for depending on the situation, set up so that I can nest them. So if I know that it's a quick and dirty, okay, I have a power outage this time, this is what I need in case I have to get out. But if we know it's a longer term effect, I don't have the snow that you have, but I have floods. So, in that situation, I might get into that. I try the best I can to nest my equipment that way so that it can take me from a short term to a medium to a longer term. Then I think about what is the probability. A high probability of a natural disaster, that's a high probability, I should say. A low probability may be some kind of man-made occurrence, maybe an EMP. But then you have to take into consideration what is the consequence of that. So with a natural disaster, it can be anywhere from a low, medium to a high, right? You could have a power outage like I had over the weekend for a day. That's low. You have your stuff self-prepared for that. Could be medium, long-term, couple weeks, or high if, there's a tremendous amount of damage that you need to bug out, even though it's just a natural disaster. If it's an EMP, we're not 100% sure, but it could be medium. Maybe it affects some devices. Maybe it doesn't affect all, or high, that it's an absolute disaster. in which you're basically using a bike or on foot. So that's kind of the way I think about this situation. But again, my thought is small, medium, large bags, nest the equipment, and that way you have it all together. But maybe some redundancy there, but also just it should be dependent on the amount of time you think you're going to need it.
Well, and then that's another part of the whole equation that, again, and just from my humble opinion, so many people I've heard say, well, I'm just going to load up my rucksack and I'm going to grab the family and I'm going to go. I'm like, okay, I guess. I mean, just tell me where, you're going, but you haven't even thought about how you're going to go from there. You haven't thought about, whether your kids can do this, and we'll get into this stuff in a couple seconds. But to what Paul just said, it's like, how is this all nesting together? How am I going to, or is every time this happens, I deplete a resource? How is that resource being replenished? Or do I need different resources in different bags that can still nest together, that can still then, in the worst of the scenarios, right? That whether we call this the lowest probability, nuclear war, the probability of nuclear war, I know it's fun to talk about, but honestly, it's pretty low. I mean, because there are scenarios that people talk about for limited exchange nuclear war, but okay, well, who are those culprits? I mean, and I'm not picking on any individual or any country, but I'm just going to say it. So let's just say Iran acquires nuclear weapons and Iran is just dead set on attacking the United States of America. Well, does that scenario look like the same scenario in your mind if Russia and China and America were engaged in a nuclear conflict? Of course not. It looks very different. And to Paul's point, that might not even be a direct nuclear exchange. I mean, if I was Iran, I wouldn't go down that road. I would try to sneak one in, or I would do an EMP type of event, right? So, but in those scenarios, there are still very severe consequences. Again, and we'll go into this. You've got to start thinking all of this stuff through, because if it's an EMP and people aren't dead, but there's no power, and if you're a person who relies on power for either, business, Paul's side, keeping the economy going or keeping infrastructure going, or you need that power because you've got very specific medical conditions. So those bags, those needs, and what you're putting into them, I think are going to be very different based on, again, how you, the individual, and again, this is just a class to try to give you some tools to think about what you believe to be the most lowest probability, medium probability, high probability. And look, and you can see this is mathematical. It isn't always high probability, low consequence. It could be a wide variety. I'm just trying to show you a way of thinking about it so you can start, okay, it snows every year here for like 8 months, and it gets 40 to 60 below. And, so I got to be thinking about this. These are the higher probability and potentially high consequence events, right? So whereas a zombie apocalypse, as fun as that sounds, and somebody could argue that we're already in one, but what's the real probability here? All right. So before I move on, guys, again, the whole point of this slide was just trying to set that stage and to get everybody thinking. Again, this isn't one. Well, here, I'll shut up. Do you guys want to add to that before we kind of start moving forward? Because the next ones are, now we're going to start getting into it.
Yeah, and I think that to a certain degree, this may actually kind of segue into the next portion. But I won't quite get ahead of myself here pertaining to what you said, because there's a lot I can say about just grabbing stuff and walking into the woods. But one thing that I would like to point out is, as it pertains to the bags and what your preparations are, I for whatever reason, Mark, I don't know if this is the same way as you or Paul, but I grew up with the saying of like 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So like you have to understand like what your rate of consumption is. And if you're taking a bag for your family, or your family are going to have their own bags, or however it is that you're going to plan it out, you have to be cognizant of the rate of consumption. Because if you have one of something and you're out of it, the probability, if we're going to talk probability and statistics here, is very low that you're going to be able to replenish that anytime soon. So you have to be you have to be cognizant of your environment, what you're setting up for, how many people you're setting up for, and overall how that's going to impact whether it's short term, mid term, or long term. And the consequences that ensue after that. So that's something I just kind of wanted to point out there that I felt was kind of important. So,
Paul?
Yeah, I think that Rose made a comment about a medicine bag or medical bag, and that's absolutely part of what I do. I have a medical bag for the family. I have a medical bag for the animals, and they're all ready to go. And that's absolutely key. An IFAC and all that. You carry that kind of stuff on you on a daily basis if you're going out for a hike or you're going camping for a while. But long term, you can go into the types of medicines you need. You mentioned, Mark, about power outages, and if it's a long term, then you have people that require medicines that require refrigeration. If they don't have that, there's issues there. But have that medicine bag prepared, and I absolutely agree with that 100%.
So what's great for everybody who is watching is Paul and I have never taught this class with each other. Paul and Jeremy have never taught it. I've never taught it with so. This is it's again, it's lots of fun. I hope you're just here having some fun and doing something more meaningful with your evening than watching Rick and Morty. Although Rick and Morty is pretty meaningful, but you just had two guys who just chimed in, and this is where we're about to go with the slide deck. All right, this is kind of like, but it's great. I'm glad it just happened right there, because again, we were just talking about the probabilities and consequences, and that's already just got people thinking and talking and saying things. And now let's try to, I'm not trying to say, again, cookie cutter but empower ourselves with some tools. So those answers, or the answers to those questions just came up just from one side that talked about probabilities and consequences. Now let's try to put some tools in our toolkit, and everybody's going to use the tool a little differently, but that actually then at that point kind of start giving us some ways to be better at it or think about things a little differently. So, all right, we already kind of talked about this. I guess I'm just going to bring this slide up, though, for one reason. Here's the deal, and I really mean this. You've already heard Jeremy say this, but before we go any further, you got to check your ego at the door. When you're having a question, a conversation that even in any remote way has to do with survival. And so that could be wilderness survival, combat, law enforcement, just going to and from work. Anytime, that's a serious question. And you have to check your ego at the door. There's no room for that stuff. Again, how smart am I? I'm smart enough to know I don't know everything. Well, I mean, I still have an ego, but it's not overinflated and stupid. I mean, somebody's going to tell me something that I don't know. And I'm also going to be honest with myself. And here, I'll just bring it back over to our view. So as we start talking about go bags, and there was just a conversation about medicine, I'm old and broken. There's certain environments and certain things that I'm not capable of doing anymore. So I've got to take that into consideration, check my ego. Oh, I used to be able to do this, and that doesn't matter. I can't do that anymore. And here, I'll just say, if there was a real world EMP type of situation here in northern Minnesota last winter, now this winter I might have a chance. I got another surgery coming, but see, that's no ego. I'm taking into consideration all these factors. But last winter, I would have been dead. There's no way I could have survived outside by myself because of my physical limitations for last year. Yeah. So check your ego at the door when you're actually thinking about this stuff, and when you're planning what you should have. And to Paul's point, think about it layers. There's the house, there's the vehicle, there's your rucksack, and then there's your person. I mean, somebody else might even think of another layer. Maybe you fly, all the time. Maybe you've got a different type of travel bag. Maybe you've got an even more special bag for that worst case scenario, should it ever happen. And that bag is solely for that thing. Maybe you really do believe there's going to be zombies or there is going to be a nuclear war. You might want to have one specific bag just for that event. And if you've got the time and the resources, then knock yourself out. Yeah. And then that's what we're getting at here. So, all right, I'm going to kind of bring it over to here. My view is a little bit tweaked. Are you guys actually able to see the whole slide, or is it cut off a little bit?
Yep. No, I see it perfect.
Oh, man, on my side, it's a little cut off. So, okay, that's on me. So here, when you start thinking about this, and we just kind of started to introduce this subject when we talked about probability and consequences. So the next thing is, and I know there's somebody who's going to be like, mission. What does that mean? Do you go to work every day? That's called a mission, right? That's your mission. I got to go to work today. I got to bring the kids to hockey practice. I got to go to the grocery store. These are your missions, right? You could also say, you could take it to the next level up. There was an EMP, and I now need to walk 30 miles from my place of employment to my home. because there's no way I'm leaving my family behind. That also could be in your thought process. Again, you start off with, well, what is it I'm really thinking is going to happen?
Right.
And then that flows into, okay, well, then what's my mission? Because if you don't have family, maybe you have no reason to go home. Maybe you actually want to go 15 miles to your buddy's house because he's better supplied and you've got a better chance as a team. So you got to ask yourself, what is my mission? What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? And then the subsequent flow of that, which should be pretty obvious, what tasks then need to be accomplished in order to be able to perform that mission? And then what is the purpose that support the tasks? Why am I doing something? Oh, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to learn how to do underwater basket weaving. You've got to be able to say to yourself, well, why did I just learn underwater basket weaving? How does that help me accomplish my mission? How does that support the task at hand, right? And then to kind of something that Jeremy has said in the past, then what are the special requirements or the tools that are required in order to do it? Because if you think you need to be able to do something, whatever that is, underwater basket weaving, well, then you're going to need some specialty tools. You're going to need scuba equipment. You're going to need weights. You're going to need, baskets to weave, that kind of stuff. So I know that it's kind of funny, but guys, is that making sense right there? I mean, and it doesn't have to be a yes or no. I mean, if somebody wants to elaborate, please go ahead.
Yeah, or go ahead, Paul.
No, I was going to say underwater basket weaving. That reminds me, there was a course in college in the 80s that could have taken with that. Is that really a thing? I never took it. I just laughed at it.
that can't be real, right? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, it can't be.
No, well, now that you said it can't be, it most likely is. So.
Right. Well, hang on a second. Paul's pretty old like me, so now in today's university, that might be real, but I don't think during our time that was really a class. But who knows? You could be surprised. But I just want to leave that up there just for a second and let everybody kind of look at it. Again, I'm going to use some military terms through here because that's my background, right? That's just the world I lived in, right? But those terms, they're universal. I mean, a mission, again, it's the same thing. Well, do you have to go to work? Do you have to walk 30 miles to get home? These are things that we all understand. Whether you like the vocabulary is irrelevant, right? Again, check your ego at the door. There's no room for that. And then on a final little plug, the military has been doing this in earnest since the time of man and has done a pretty damn good job of learning how to either kill our fellow men or stay alive and not let our fellow men kill us. So I know that sounds cold and heartless, whatever, but the military has a pretty good idea of how to go about this thought process and this planning process in order to achieve either a maximum effectiveness. And if that effectiveness is survival or destruction, we've been doing this as humans for a long time. So don't just poo-poo it because these are military terms, right? Again, everybody knows what a task is. Maybe you just call it chores. It's the same damn thing. Chores, tasks, right? And then what is the purpose? But more importantly, I always love that one. What is the purpose? Because you'll see a lot of people in here. I'm going to bring it into a different view for a second because I know Redbeard and Paul might want to be able to add to this. But you'll see lots of people who will focus on something and it might be kind of neat and esoteric, but what purpose does it serve? How does it help you accomplish your goals? Fellas, does that make sense? And does anyone have a real world example of that in your personal lives?
Well, so one thing that I can draw off of specifically is, Mark, I've said this, I don't know how many times I said it in the beginning, like I do varied types of training and I've done I've had week hikes. I've done a lot of different things. I've done bushcrafting and a lot of the situations that I've been in that I've experienced, which does translate to, if something goes sideways, kind of like you said, like, hey, look, if you end up having to make that walk, there is a very real component to where we need to have an honest conversation, not only about the situation, but we have to have an honest conversation with ourselves. We have to be able to adequately self-evaluate, leaving the ego at the door, like Mark said, and being able to ask ourselves questions of, okay, if I have to, under my own power, can I take this bag that I have that has my supplies, that has all of the potentially life-saving pieces of equipment, can I take this 5 miles? Can I take this 10 miles? Can I take this to wherever my destination is going to go? And I know that there's there's so many people out there that are very I think complacent in the idea of like, oh well, like you know, you get the I don't have to run from my fights type of thing. Well, there comes a time to where you may not have that choice, and if you don't have the ability to carry what you have over a certain distance, or to go up and over varied terrain, or to just burden the load that is in that pack, then you're at a disadvantage before you even start. That's literally going to neuter the entire potential advantage that bag is going to give you. That being said, outside of the physical realm, we need to also understand that don't be afraid to add things to your bag that you don't understand how to use. Just make sure that you learn how to use them. It's okay to have a med kit, but learn how to use the med kit. It's okay to have fire starters, learn how to use the fire starters. It's
well,
not
okay, so now that's going to get into when we get into the second half, but that's a great point right there. There are some things that are going to be, you know, just glaringly and abundantly obvious,
or at least they should be.
Well, exactly right, and you know, we're kind of jumping ahead just a little, just a little bit, but that's exactly to that point. Now, but the corollary, or not the corollary, but the other side of the coin, and then I'll turn it over to Paul before we go to the next one. But it doesn't mean, oh, I should just go buy body armor. Well, why? You know, like, and it's not like you need to learn how to use body armor. I'm throwing this out there. It's kind of different from what Jerry was saying, but to me, it's still the other side of the coin. If that doesn't fit into what you think are the most probable events, that's what I'm getting at. Now, 100%. If you've got the money and the resources, so that's what I'm trying to say to you, Jeremy. It's like, if you've got the time, the resources, and the capabilities, there's a shit ton of things that you can do and you should do. But most of us have limited resources and limited time. So
and I would definitely say also that if that's the case, like that's also that self-evaluation. So honestly evaluate what your situation is, build a bag that's going to, or build a preparations that are going to not hinder you, but are going to supplement you so that you can get the most out of whatever it is that you're trying to do, as opposed to have it being a detracting factor down the road. So you don't need to have 80 pounds of gear in your ruck to make it work. One, it's backbreaking, but two, it's impractical for most people. So
before we bring it over to Paul and then move on to the next slide. So, you know, Spoon's back there, and I'm seeing you know, in the chat, I'm seeing a note from what's out there on YouTube, and there's Mr. Dragul is asking, you know, a question. How he can't seem to build a bug out bag that doesn't weigh 60 pounds. And Jeremy, you just kind of pointed at, you know, hit at that. Like, well, does it need to be 60 or 80 pounds? And then so bringing this into Paul, you know, well, maybe that needs to be a layered effect. If you think that's necessary, that you need to have that much gear, and that much gear weighs that much based on what you think is the most probable and, you know, and consequential event, well, then, you know, I mean, I know the next thing would be like, well, then you're going to have to train harder. Or I think to Paul's point, well, then you're going to have to think about layers. And I'm just going to, now we're getting in outside of the realm of this class. Or, you know, again, if your mission is I've got to get home, but I don't want to have a bag that weighs 60 pounds because I can't do it physically, or I don't want to do it, I don't have the time. Well, then there are options such as caches, and you can start doing caches along the route. But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit because we will talk about routes and things of that comes into.
We'll provide a lot more nuance to this.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, regardless of, you know, to reiterate what Redbeard said, was practice with whatever you plan on taking with you. And, you know, make sure you know how to use your gear before you take it with you. Just having a bag full of stuff is not necessarily going to be helpful. I did see something about in the comments about the mental state. Make sure that you're prepared mentally. You know, that's difficult to prepare for, right? So try and use an example of when, you know, you go through a severe power outage, or you've been through something else like a flood, and just try and remember those type of times. And, you know, I'm not a doctor, so I can't give medical advice. I'm just saying that mental preparedness is also important as well. Now, physical, if you don't practice carrying that gear with you and you have a 60-pound pack and you're hauling it now, you're going to be in trouble. And at my age, I sure as heck can't do that.
Thanks for saying that as we move forward, because that's why Redbeard and I were laughing earlier. He's heard me say this like ad nauseum, but it's my favorite thing when someone says, "Oh, I'm just going to throw a ruck on my back and head in the woods." I'm like, dude, you've never walked 12 miles in your life. I'm like, I'm like, it isn't going to be what you think it is if that's what you think it is. Look, and I'm not saying I'm all that either. I've never done the long march or any of those things, but I spent, 30 plus years of my life with a rucksack or body armor and gear. I mean, I'm here to tell you, on the road is one thing, over, undulating or, restricted or unrestricted or severely restricted terrain, having other people with you. I mean, no, you're not. So here, matter of fact, it's a good point. Now we're a little bit off topic, but seriously, I would actually say in your preparedness as you're going into it, and as we start getting into the Met TC and Akoka, do everything you can to possibly avoid having to carry 80 pounds for 20 or 30 or 40 miles. Yeah. So that would be that is just a personal opinion. Yeah. You do you, maybe you come up, or hang on, one last thing. See, this is have friends. We're kind of jumping around a little bit and talk about this, because I just realized, then why not, if you have a bicycle and dude, 80 pounds on a bicycle and you're just pushing the bicycle is way better than having it on your back. But now you're going to be on roads, and then that's going to come into question here in a second. Right. Maybe you don't want to be on roads. So,
yeah. And I will just add quickly to your point, Mark. For me, and I don't know about for you, but I don't really feel like there's any, whether it's road or rough terrain, to where moving underweight is ever really comfortable. You make it as okay as you can get it, but once you hit that 12, 15, 20 mile mark, it all kind of sucks the same. So a lot of it does come down to how you pack your pack, but weight is weight.
So many, there's so many variables. Let's save that for later, because socks and foot maintenance comes into play and all that too. So
but that's also getting into a young, in shape man is still saying that stuff is heavy and a problem. So that's reassuring to me. I feel better now.
Longevity, fellas. Longevity.
Right.
Oh no, we just like the fact that you just made us feel good, So all right, moving on here. All right, everybody. Hey, seriously, this is the first time we've done this. We're trying to make it fun, also a little entertainment, but educational. And if you're here watching, it's your podcast. So, Spoon's been sending me some really good comments in our private chat. So keep it coming. And if anybody wants to join in, don't forget, we're not just the standard here is what you want this to be. We are going to cut it off an hour and a half, but if somebody wants to come on and have a good point or has a question, just let Spoon see it in the chat and we'll bring you on. So moving on, next slide. All right. So we kind of already discussed this a little bit. I'm going to bring this full screen here, but I mean, I don't want to beat this to death, but I do want to emphasize there is a huge difference. I don't think people take into consideration. What is the task? What am I trying to accomplish? And what is the purpose behind that? Hey, and then so I just threw some examples in here because it kind of fits in with everything we've said so far. If you think that it's a medium or high probability event, that there's going to be some type of EMP event and you are going to be 30 miles away from home. So like what we were just talking about, road marches, rucksack, ruck marches, lots of weight. Well, okay, maybe you don't want to do that, but one of your tasks might be, hey, I need to go out and throw some boots on, so again, we're kind of getting into gear. Your vehicle can be one of your go bags. And I'm always going to have a well-worn, broken in pair of boots in my vehicle. And I've got a go bag in my vehicle, and I'm going to go out and start. And my task is to practice, walking, certain distances, because I've got 30 miles to travel in this medium probability, but high consequence event as you deem it, right? Again, it's your environment, it's your world, right? So it's your scale. And so you might have to prepare for that, on that level, right? So that might be your task. Start preparing to be able to, go long distances. The purpose, so I can get home within, and give yourself a legitimate, so I can make it home within 2 days because my wife, my family needs me, whatever it is. You see the point here, task and purpose. I think some people sometimes lose sight of that, right? And so I just threw up 2 examples, of what that could be. And to Paul's point earlier, you got to get out and start training with things. Well, what's the task? I need to start training with my gear. Why is that? The purpose, which is the whys, so I can become proficient in my gear, whether it's a fire starter or a bow drill or, a weapons platform or whatever it is, because I need, in order to be proficient with it, because if this crisis does happen, low, medium, or high probability, it doesn't matter. I need to be proficient in it, right?
Yep.
So, all right. And here we go. Next one. Anybody got anything to add? Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going.
I think that was a good summary.
Okay, going on to the next slide. And I got to change the view here for 1 second because I don't see our timer here. How are we doing on time, guys? Where are we?
45.
Yeah, okay, my timer is somehow, for some reason, hidden from me. But anyway, so okay,
yeah, I can stay on top of it.
Okay, yeah, keep us on track, right? So, all right, here we go. Back into this, right? So we already did this slide. Jeremy and I talked about it, but I'm just going to throw it up there one more time because it kind of summarizes what we've been saying to this point. Yeah. And this would be my argument. The first place to start in this whole conversation is you got to even ask yourself, what the hell is it that you think is going to happen? Why do you even need a go bag? It's going to be different for every person, and you might have multiple bags for multiple contingencies. I'm going to turn it over to Paul and Redbeard. I know they've got something to add here before we go into the next one. Wrapping that up.
If Paul wants to go first, he can take it.
Yeah, no, I'm comments were popping in, so I started reading those. But honestly, I'm laughing at some of the comments because it is funny. So I'm slightly distracted, but yeah. So as far as the consequences. It's the scenarios that do occur. I've had situations that were, short term, obviously, and some that were, unknown, and some that were absolutely catastrophic with a complete, flood, where you knew that you were done for, months. So, having things on hand, not just a go bag, but what about a stay in bag? Right. Yes. I'm going to be able to stay in my home, but I lost power and I know I'm not going to get it. I lost water and I know I'm not going to get it for weeks. Do I have filtering? Do I have a natural water source close by? And I've been in those situations. And by having that with me, helped me tremendously. And, I don't want to go into the details of all that, but, it's not even necessarily just a go bag. It's a stay in bag with I have my shelter. That was it. Yeah. That's all I had was shelter.
Well, so it's a free flowing type of event, but Paul, that's a great point because again, there's always two sides to every coin. And if you have these items and these skills, well, not only do they benefit you if you are away from your base of operations, your ultimate goal of getting back to your base of operations or getting to a different location where it's safer or there's friends. But to your point, and I'm sure everybody's got their personal stories. Mine is similar to Paul's. I was without power for 7 days at my first place, but it was all of that outdoor experience and that outdoor gear, the gear in my bags. And I was like, I'm indoor camping for 7 days.
Yep.
And it was not a big deal, right? And I mean, Paul, is that kind of what you're getting at a little bit?
Yeah, no, I mean, it exactly.
Okay. All right, Redbeard, anything to add? Otherwise, we're going to move on here.
Just a quick one. So basically, just to kind of wrap up the scenarios and all of this stuff, what I would recommend that people do is take just a couple minutes out of your day at some point and sit down and write out a basic assessment of what you realistically feel that you're going to have to contend with and why you need something like this to begin with. And I know that Mark kind of said that, but I think when you sit down, you take pen to paper and you put actual thought into it, I think it kind of adds a little bit of weight to it and it kind of brings it and makes it a little more real. And what I would tell people is there's a lot of things that do kind of blend into one another to some degree. So you don't have to be like overwhelmingly specific. You can start with like, general situations and then kind of build your way out from there. So you don't have to overcomplicate the process. Just keep it simple, keep it streamlined. But I think for anybody that's kind of wondering, like, okay, like how do I even start? That's what I would do is I'd sit down, make an assessment of what you think are going to be like the 3 or 4 most likely situations in your lifetime or your average day to day. And then you'll be able to figure out what is going to be needed and how to adequately kind of build out your bag from there. So
again, this is what makes it awesome. And if anyone's watching, this is why we want you guys to chime in. And if you're willing to do it, to come over here as well. So that wasn't scripted. None of the stuff we do is scripted. And what Redbeard just threw out there, it's actually something from later in the class. And it's even more intricate than what if you really want to get into the weeds. I mean,
oh yeah.
And for anybody who's watching, used to be in the military, I mean, you're thinking about not your troop leading procedures. I know somebody just thought that right there. Somebody said troop leading procedures. Nope, that's not what I'm talking about. So I'm thinking about when you start doing your training metrics, right? You know, you're looking at individual tasks, supporting tasks, you know, your operations. Yeah. That's ultimately saying, and that's a great point, because I'm just now thinking about, oh, what was that? There was a show years ago, and I didn't really watch it. Wasn't it Doomsday Preppers or something? They had some it was a kind of
they graded them on certain points, I think.
Yeah, and weren't these just like random people who were then on the show, and then they said what they thought they were planning for? Is that the same show? Yeah, I just remember seeing one of those, and I'm like, these guys are like swinging for the fences, and they don't even know how to swing a bat. I mean, like, you know, so that's what I like. What you just said, Jeremy. It's like, okay, you might think that's real, but instead of like the first thing that you're spending your time, energy, and resources on, you know, if that's, you know, hey, I'm going to go get a full complement of NBC equipment and like, but in the meantime, you don't even know how to tape up your windows to help keep, you know, like start, you got to start someplace, right? Individual tasks, you know, supporting tasks, collective tasks.
In this case, keep it simple, stupid, and then work your way up from there. Because if you try and get super specific right away, I'm telling you, you're going to get lost in the weeds.
Yeah.
So,
all right, moving on. All right, here we go. I think we're getting, and this is why. So this is, I forgot about this. Yeah. From the,
I forgot about that picture,
but that is so, it's classic. I hope, you know, we're having a little fun, but I hope it summarizes what we were just trying to say to everybody. It's like, hey, look, if you think it's zombies, well, and if you believe certain movies, because there are other movies where zombies, they don't really swim. They just walk along the bottom and then they pop up on the other side. So without being too stupid, but zombies don't swim. So get a boat, you know? All right, here we go. All right. Now this might seem a little stupid. And I know right now somebody's saying the 5 W's. I haven't heard that since I was 7. Exactly. It's way more detailed and more intricate than just the 5 W's. When you're thinking about and this kind of goes into everything Jeremy just said a second ago, and I see Paul smiling, so I think he is already going to be chiming in here in a second. But it isn't just to that point. I'm going to grab my rucksack and go, and I'm going to flee. Yeah. Who's going to do this? Just me. Okay. What is your background and experience doing this? When are you going to do this? Where are you going to go? You know, all these things come into play. But then you need to keep asking yourself, well, how many people are going to do this? Is it just me, or is it, well, no, how many people? It's going to be me, my wife, and my 2 infant children. So that's your plan. You are just going to grab your rucksack, and then these 3 other people who don't have that background and experience, that don't have the gear or the capabilities, they're just going to come with you. And you think the what is, we're going to walk 60 miles to my mom's house for survival. Do you see where I'm kind of going with this? It is so much more than just some, you know, little thing that we teach kids. It's more detailed. And I'm going to stop right there and let Paul and Jeremy chime in on that, because it is much more detailed. And I didn't even do it any justice getting into the nuances here.
Yeah. So early on, I would have said, you know, the who is obviously me, but, you know, how many would be my entire family, including my wife. So we, you know, it was a different situation back then. Now that I'm older, it's me, my wife, and now we have all these, you know, these animals that help sustain our livelihood. What do we do? Do we end up having to abandon them? And that may be the case. And I would, you know, try and avoid that as much as possible. But so, you know, those are considerations to take in. You know, a lot of people talk about being self-sustainable and that kind of stuff. Well, okay. Maybe I am right now, but what if there's a disaster here? Maybe there's a train derailment close by, and you know, all the animals are dead, and we're lucky enough to leave with our lives. So we move on. Now we're starting over again. So those are the considerations. My ideal situation is to be able to hunker down here and, you know, do that. But with that train derailment that, you know, has happened all over the place, train derailments, I should say, you never know. Right. I mean, maybe I will have to up and get out there. So there's a lot of other things, but as far as if we had to get up and go at this point in my life, it's way different than when 20 years ago when I would get up and we would be in 2 cars and have all the kids and that kind of stuff and animals with us, no livestock or anything, but and get the heck out of Dodge. We could easily do that back then. It would be uncomfortable, but it could have been done. So life changes.
Well, so, and that's why this is located in the slide deck where it is, because we just, we started off with the fun, zombies and what are the scenarios that we're envisioning, but now we're starting to get into the real life. And so, as you just said, hey, when it was just you, it could have been 1, 2, and 3. Now you got the who, right? So the who, and that's why how, and I always threw in how many. That's the 2H. How many? Well, how many who's? You could take that 2H and apply it to every one of those things. What? Well, how many whats? How many scenarios am I preparing for? When? Well, okay, think about that. Am I going to prepare for, when do you think it's most likely? I'm most vulnerable when I'm at work and my wife is at work. You see what I'm saying? As opposed to, because, otherwise we spend, 16 hours a day with each other. It's that it really helps you start breaking down and analyzing the question, of what it is that you're even considering and preparing for, because that is what's going to determine the whole, go bag or the bug out bag scenario.
Right.
Redbeard.
Yeah. So there's a couple things I can kind of add to that. And by the way, Paul, there was just another train derailment in Pennsylvania that occurred.
Right. And that's what I'm sorry to not to steal your thunder, but so in that, honestly, that suddenly is becoming a higher probability event, and the consequences, evacuation.
Alarmingly.
When it's just you, it's one thing. When it's you and a family of 4, it's a completely different scenario.
Correct. Yeah. And so, I don't think that this what's on this particular slide, I do not think that it should ever be undervalued, in my opinion, because it kind of, again, it going back to that sitting down, writing out an assessment for your, that you feel is going to be necessary or pertinent to helping you build the bag. Like, this is going to be part of that assessment phase, right? So when you're sitting down, you should write this out, and you should actually factor in these different things, because if the difference between honestly answering those questions and just kind of putting whatever on a piece of paper is actually, you don't realize it at the time, but it will affect how you build out your bags, how you build out your level of preparedness. So if you're honest about it, and you take it and you use it the best way that you possibly can, you're going to have a far more effective thing. Now, there's a saying that I heard a long time ago that I really, really like, and it's the 6 P's. Prior planning prevents piss poor performance. I'm a huge advocate of that saying. And what is a plan? A plan is something that is not going to prevent, but it's going to mitigate any potential problems down the road. So it's not going to prevent entirely, but it's going to mitigate the potential damage or the potential effects down the road. So this is all going to factor in how we build our bags.
And I'll just throw this in there, Jeremy, just from a, my military, agency background.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. What the plan does is you've rehearsed it and thought it through. So when something unknown presents itself, you're not totally caught flat-footed.
Yeah.
We were all going to turn left, and now we're all going right. Okay. We're still turning, so we're, you can flow and deal with things a lot better when you have a plan, right? Because you always hear a plan, never, okay, those are all catchy phrases and there's maybe truth in it, but that plan, what I think with all those sayings have always been absent is what you just said, Jeremy. It's like, at least I had a plan. So I had something to go off of, and that's helping shape my next reactions. And hopefully those next reactions were the things I've done up until this point made sense and are giving me a better chance of a successful outcome. And that's what we're talking about here with Go Bags.
100%.
I just got to do a quick little pause here because as you guys were talking, I'm looking at the private chat. Spoon's updating me on some commentary that's going out there in the chat. And I just got to throw this out there. So for everybody who is watching, I think you guys might be weird because I'm getting things like tacos are life. Tacos are life.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Dragoo, roaming gangs. Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's something to be considered. Then somebody said something about an awesome meme. So apparently people are sharing memes about tacos. And then Midga preparedness his bug out bag is whiskey, weed, maybe the wife, and Waldo the dog. Yeah. So those are some pretty cool comments so far. I like that.
You guys are killing it, by the way.
Yeah. I don't know what tacos have to do with anything, but hey, if that's your thing, you do you, baby. So here we go. All right. Now we're kind of getting to some things. And I'm just going to pull it up. Well, I'm going to leave it right here for just a second. So again, I know there's going to be some people who are turned off by the whole military acronyms and whatnot, but again, then you're not being open-minded enough to the realities and the strengths that other organizations or other individuals from those organizations might provide to your overall thought process on this whole, do I need a go bag? What should go in it? Do I need a go bag for these different environments and these different situations? So again, the military actually has an incredible history, unfortunate history, the history of mankind, of trying to figure out the best ways to survive or defeat your enemy, right? So this is one of them. So don't please think about this as some kind of crazy military term. It really isn't. It's a term. It's easy to remember. You can throw it into your hip pocket, modify it, make it yours, but it goes in. So I'm starting to summarize everything we've kind of talked about now and getting preparation for what we're going to talk about next. So again, METTC, right? It's a military term. It's been around for, well, maybe it's not around in the military anymore, but I was in the military from the 80s and then out for a little bit and then back again at the, 2000 and something, whatever. But so I did have like this big, gap in my military service when I was in the agency, but METTC was still around when I left back in like 2014, something like that. So mission, again, don't be freaked out. The mission is, well, what are you trying to accomplish? I'm trying to get home to my family. I'm trying to save my farm. I'm trying to, hell, there are riots taking place in my city and houses are burning. My mission is to make sure that you could have multiple missions. I don't want my house to burn, but if my house catches on fire, I need to escape my house. This is your mission, right? This is the first part of your thought process, going in besides the probability and the consequences of what it is that you're going to start putting into your go bag, or even if you need a go bag whatsoever, your mission. What is it that you're trying to do? The enemy. It doesn't have to be North Korean saboteurs. It doesn't have to be anything like that. The enemy could just as simply be the environment. If you think Mother Nature is your buddy, I don't know what kind of like Mother Nature experiences you've had. Mother Nature will reach out and slap you down and kill you in a heartbeat if you're not prepared and not thinking about that. So Mother Nature could be your enemy. Traffic could be your enemy. I mean, just think about this. You could apply METTC just even to drive into work. What's my mission? I got to get up, drink some coffee, and go to work. Okay. What's the enemy? Traffic at I-94 and whatever. Okay. Well, then, so you're already telling yourself, well, I need to find another route because I don't want to, I want to avoid contact with the enemy. The terrain. And I think this is, I'm kind of getting into things where I'm going to slow down. I think the mission and the enemy is pretty obvious what we really mean by that. But I think when we get into terrain and time and troops available, I'm going to start letting, Jeremy and Paul speak. But the terrain right there. So anybody want to jump on that and kind of lead the conversation?
I can take it real quick.
All right, you got it.
So
what does that mean from your go bag perspective and why you're even building a go bag?
Yeah. So as it pertains to a go bag, so like Mark, you and I live within the same relative proximity. And so as like we have varied terrain here, right? And how does that going to factor into what I have in my go bag? Well, in a lot of the hiking that I've done in the area that we live in, very simple, mechanical injury. What is the risk of mechanical injury? How does terrain factor into that? How does moving underweight factor into the pathways or the trails or whatever it is that I might take? The terrain is a very, very important consideration because as much as it can help you, it can also hinder you. But in that same breath,
it can also kill you.
In that same breath, I want to also say that if your worry is a OPFOR or opposing force that you're trying to deal with, terrain can also be something to help you hinder them. So if you know that terrain better than they know that terrain, you can use that to an advantage. Now, time is something.
No,
I
hey,
think
don't jump ahead yet. Let's give Paul a chance.
Sure.
But I love what you just said because you're kind of stealing my thunder from. But that's exactly it. If enemy means enemy, it could be violent looters. It could be people, like, hey, I've got to walk 30 miles in the next 3 days to get home. Well, okay. And if you're on a road and you're going to be going through a couple towns where there's maybe meth houses or bad, or quote unquote bad people, well, then you really do have an enemy. And then you're going to have to look at the terrain and try to use it to your advantage. Now we're going to get to that in the next slide, but I want to give Paul a chance. But first off, I just got a heads up. So MIDGA preparedness, make everything a mission, because it is. Get to work alive, get home alive. Yeah, damn right, sir. Damn right.
Heck yeah.
Well, sir, ma'am. Sorry, not sure who that person is, but Paul, you want to add into that before we continue?
Yeah, I was going to say that, mentioning about, nefarious people out there that might be the enemy, but there also could be at some point those that didn't prepare, those that don't have enough food. They may be good people, but they're going to need their food to survive. So, but so that's just one thought there. But one of the other things is in the terrain that I'm in, I have hills, mountains, and valleys, whatever you want to call them locally. But one issue that I have is down trees. So I may have a path where I may not have to climb up a hill or a mountain, but now I have trees in the way. So I have to actually climb up the hills and mountains. And then the terrain is horrendous. And somebody, it depends on how old you are, but then again, even when I was younger, I injured my knees doing dumb stuff. So it doesn't matter that way. So there's still a danger there as far as the terrain goes. And as far as the time, if I've been in a place where I have flat ground, relatively flat ground, some hills, am I getting ahead?
Yeah, I was just saying, we'll go into time in a second here, because I just want to stay on terrain, because you brought up another, a great point when it comes to that terrain, and I may have just lost my terrain of thought as we went there, because again, we've never taught this class together and everything, but from that very real world perspective, as you were saying, Paul, this terrain, down vehicle or down trees. So again, if that is the contingency you're planning for, right, this is what your bug out bag, whether that's on your person, rucksack, your vehicle, you might have to take that into consideration. Like, hey, I've got all these trees, down, and now it's going to take me a longer time, or it might influence how you're even going to get there. And again, we're going to get to this. You may have had a plan where I have a bicycle, or I can do it in my vehicle. Well, what if you hit these terrain impediments, right? So again, in the military, old school, there was 3 different ways of looking at it. We used to call it, go, no go, and slow go. Now it's, unrestricted, restricted, and severely restricted. But it basically means is, can I even traverse this terrain? But then I just want to throw that out there. You've got to take every one of these. There's, again, just like the 5W2H, there's so many levels on every one, because we're sitting here talking from an individual perspective. Imagine now it's you and your family. Now imagine, Paul, you were just saying, it isn't just you, it's all these other things. Well, how are you going to move through this terrain with all these other things? And then the corollary to that, though, is what if there's bad guys along the way? That just, again, in a real world, it's bad enough competing and trying to survive Mother Nature. Now try to survive, honestly, which probably is the world's apex predator, humanity, right? Yeah. So that just changes the equation. So before we went into the time, I just had to throw that out there, because I'm glad you guys just took it in that direction, because those are, again, I'm just going to throw my rucksack and go, and, kind of back over to last comment, back over to Redbeard. We live in northern Minnesota. It's the land of 10,000 lakes. What does that mean? I'm just going to get up and go.
Right.
How many rivers are you going to cross? How many do you have? Like, the only way to avoid that is to stay on the blacktop or the railroad, grade, or, something like that. If you're walking straight line, I'm here to tell you, within the first 5 miles, you've probably encountered 2 lakes and 3 major streams and stuff like that. You've got to really look at this. And this is then in turn, going back to the earlier in the conversation, going to start dictating, what type of clothing you're wearing and what type of gear you're.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Oh, but I'm just going to throw my shit on and go,
Well, so. and to kind of go on to that point, it's interesting you bring up Minnesota, because the farther north you get in Minnesota, the rougher that terrain does get. We aren't just flat land and farms. So I've done a lot of hiking up the North Shore, and Mark, I know you've been up the North Shore quite a bit yourself, and you could probably attest to this. But there is, in my opinion, time plays a factor in your ability to adequately navigate terrain. And so what people will start to realize is all of these things will start to fold back on one another and dictate each little segment here and there. So when we look at time, we can look at time as a factor of, is it concealment? Is it our ability to actually navigate terrain? If the terrain's rougher, the chances of you navigating that terrain during the day as opposed to during the night is probably going to be offset a little bit. If that terrain is extremely trepidatious or rough, I don't know about you, Mark, but I'm probably not going to try and cross it at night. I'll wait for dusk or dawn when there's just enough light to see to be able to possibly start my maneuver under some level of concealment and then hopefully get some distance. So time plays a big factor in our mission planning because it dictates a lot of different things that are going to ultimately stack on one another.
Well, hang on, just slow it down. Those things that are stacking on top of one another are the things that are going in your bag. Like, so just, exactly. And I love what you just did there, Jeremy, because that's exactly it. If I have to get home in 72 hours, right, I have to get home. If that's what you think is going to take place, I have to be, and I live 30 miles away from I work 30 miles away from my house. It's an EMP. That's what you think is taking place, or it's civil unrest or whatever the scenario is. And you may have to, so again, I have to get home. And this goes back into everything we just said. Well, what's the method of travel here? And all of these things have these cascading effects. When it's just you and your vehicle, well, okay, you're fine. You can carry a ton of gear and you straight line distance and you're not worried about swamps or whatever. But then if there's an enemy, and if that enemy is, to Paul's case, something as innocuous as trees are down over the road, or it's the worst case scenario, it's zombies. Okay, well, I guess zombies, you could run them over. So maybe a vehicle's still going. But if it's human beings and and there's raiders or whatever the case is, so maybe you're no longer in a vehicle. And now you've got to, and I like Paul's way, because it's like triage. I mean, that's how I roll. It's like, if I'm in my vehicle, I can carry this much. And then if I have to go to foot, I can take this much out of my vehicle. And then I take all these other things in consideration. But at the end of the day, time, what is that? Everybody was thinking I was going to say time, but I wasn't thinking that song. I was actually thinking of, what is it? Black Label, I think. No. It's that solo guy. Time waits for no man, woman, or child. But that's it right there. So your mission, right? What it is that you have to accomplish. If you've got all the time in the world, well, it changes what goes in your bag. Correct. Maybe 80 pounds is doable because you're only going to walk 4 miles a day and then set up camp, rest, relax. You see where I'm kind of going? So people, this isn't just a military acronym. It's actually the blueprint to get your brain to start thinking, because there are so many variables that have to be taken into consideration here. All right. Redbeard,
great summary.
You're chomping. All right. Okay. Paul's smiling. Let's get Paul, and then let's move on to troops available.
No, well, one thing I would say, and Redbeard had mentioned about having, whether it's a river or a creek or something like that, and if you're trying to go across that at night, one thing that you may not, if it's an unknown creek or a river of some sort, let's assume it's a creek, because a river is going to be tough to walk across. But if you're going across that, use your flashlight, because if it's brown, that means there's some kind of stuff going on underneath. You do not want to go across that, and you may want to go around it. And if you're familiar with it, your area, okay, that's the normal flow. We're good. But so that's one of the things that I thought, and that can be treacherous if you step in something like that. The undertow, I don't even know that's what they call it in a creek, but they do in the ocean.
Well, so again, but this goes into your risk analysis, which is a different portion here. But if you've got limited time, so if your thing is, I have to get there within the next 30 minutes, because if I don't, people are dead, you're going to take additional risk, right? If the mission is that serious, right? So, but that's why, going back into what goes in your gear bag,
correct,
you have to be thinking this stuff through, or you at least have to have done the mental rehearsals. So when you get to that moment and you're in that situation, Paul just said, oh, I don't think I want to do this, I'm going to have to detour. You're able to say, do I have the time to do it? And if the answer is yes, well, okay, then go ahead and do it. If the answer is kind of, well, then maybe I need to shed some weight, or it just helps you start thinking about this. Or the answer is like, no, I've got to be there in 30 minutes, come hell or high water. I either make it or I die in the attempt. I don't know. I'm not trying to be flippant about this. I'm just saying though, you've really got to look at that and take in consideration. And then as we're moving out into the next one, unless you guys got one last thing on time, we're going to keep going.
Yeah, no, I'm good, man.
All right. Troops available. It's another kind of way, saying you can look at it a couple different ways. Who are the resources or the assets that you could rely upon? I mentioned earlier, caches. What if those caches are actually friends? I've got 30 miles to go, but I know somebody in this town and I know somebody in this town, and we've talked about stuff and I've left things at his house, or I know even under the worst circumstances, I could show up and say, hey, look, I know things are going weird. I just need to take a 30-minute break. Can I have a little bit of water? Because I got to get, you've got to think about that. So troops available. Is it the people who are with you right then and there, your family, your loved ones, your coworkers? But it's also those other resources that you might be able to tap into along your route to whatever your mission is, whatever you're trying to accomplish, because then that's going to reduce the amount of gear, potentially reduce the amount of gear that you're carrying in your bug out bag. Comments, guys?
I'll let Paul take this one first.
Yeah, I'm thinking that troops can be family members out of town, different states. You want to reunite if there's something major. So
here, I'm just going to throw this out there. It's Black Scout Survival's Tribe. I mean, that's troops available. If that was serious, every one of those people could be a cache or a way station or a strong point for anybody. Hey, I'm so-and-so on the tribe. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I start with my neighbors. Right. You find the ones that you trust, and then you branch out from there. And then, depending on where anyone else, I have friends out of state that we have, the ability to, gather together and support each other at some point.
Yep.
Right on. All right. Moving on. And then there's civilian considerations. So I'm just going to tell a quick little story. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. But, as anyone can imagine, I've got friends like these people that we're talking to right now, and we talk about this. This is interesting, and these are worthwhile conversations. So I was talking to another group of friends. This was probably 6 months or a year ago, and there was this, well, I'm country and I'm strong. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's great. Yep. But what happens when, on day 3, there's 100 people walking by your farm, and then on day 4, it's 1,000 people walking by your farm. And then on day 5, it's 10,000 people walking by your farm. Civilian considerations. So that's a MET TC. For us in the military, it's more about, we want to avoid collateral damage. I like it from this scenario because it's more about, well, are there going to be good guys, bad guys? Can you trust them? Are there going to be refugees? Are there shit? We talked about there's going to be, trees down over the road. What if there's like all kinds of abandoned vehicles and dead bodies? And then that still renders the road inoperable. So fellas.
Yeah. So you make a really good point, Mark. And I think it is one of those things that like should kind of be at the forefront of our brains in terms of visibility. Right. So you have a lot of guys that are like, okay, like we're going to have just an armed garrison here. It's like, okay, like there's nothing wrong with that, but if you can do like, it has to be one of two ways. You're either going to be low profile, or you want to be so overt that nobody wants to go near you. So
but I want to throw something in there because you just made me realize something I'd forgotten. The other part of the civilian, consideration is all of your friends who think they're going to show up at your house.
Yeah.
Like, something goes wrong, I'm just going to come to your place. So let's turn that over to Paul. I don't know if that's happened in your life. Like, again, but you still have to take this in consideration. What do you do? Yeah. What do you do if they really mean that? And here, I'm sorry, Paul, you're the one who mentioned this. So let me tie these two together. The other civilian consideration is the civilian government, right? Your government. Hey, you have done everything right and you're ready to bug in and you've got a Jenny and you've got food and X, Y, and Z. And now a city council member or the city where you live says you have to give that up because that's for the good of everyone. See what I'm saying? That's another civilian consideration. That might be considered enemy at that time, but that is another thing to take into consideration right there. Paul.
Yeah, I mean, there goes into where do you live? And it's not easy to be able to just pick up and move, but
Yep.
if your local government is good, I feel like where we're located, it is. But if it's not, it could be a challenge. And like you said, there are some cities out there that are now saying you need to take in people. I don't even want to go there, but that kind of stuff can happen. So the government, know your local government, know them well. You don't have to be friends with them, just know them, because in a bad situation, they may, be able to help, or whether or not to avoid. And one other thing I thought of before was wildlife. I mean, if you're in an area, maybe I might run across a bear or something, right? It's still dangerous, but there are other locations around the country, the world, or whatever, that may have, mountain lions, or I don't know, more dangerous animals out there. Maybe bears are the most. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that.
Yep.
So you have to be careful with wildlife, because you're no longer in your shelter. You no longer have your house.
So again, we haven't ever done this before, but so this is what is awesome. And I hope everybody else was thinking along that ways or whatever, but hey, don't worry. The military planning, the military decision-making process, the planning process will come to the rescue, because that what Paul just mentioned, that's a whole separate acronym and way of thinking about things when we talk about, it's called the COCA, and we'll get to this in a second, but those are the other considerations, because terrain is so freaking key. There's so much, terrain is vital. And so I'm just going to bring this before we go. I kind of actually want to come back to Paul on the civilian governance, the civilian considerations for a second, but just to simply say this is that question of terrain, the mission might be undefined and the enemy might be undefined and so many other variables might be undefined. But the one thing that's going to help you define what you should be going, what should be in your bag and what you're thinking about is the terrain and what the impacts of terrain are going to be on your body. And again, no ego, I'm old, I'm broken. I'm here to tell you, I used to do this all the freaking time. There's no way I could do 12 miles with 80 pounds in my back right now. My back is absolutely broken. My hips are, I'm going to be the guy looking for a push cart or figuring something else out. I mean, so you, again, I'm not even trying to give everyone an answer. I'm just trying to say, you have to be honest and think about that.
Yeah.
But Paul, back to one other thing you said, which, Jeremy has heard me say this before. I've played this game all the time, like, what is the weather doing, where I live? And I'm like, well, how many people would even survive the night if their car went off the road and all they had was what's on their person or in their vehicle? How many people survive the night, because it's hypothermic or it's 40 below. And to that point on that civilian consideration, one of the things I've also played is, what is the threshold for the city leaders of Duluth, Minnesota to start turning totalitarianism, and to become like little like fiefdoms and overlords and warlords. And so, Paul, what you were just saying, I actually think, you got to know, you're right. You got to know your city government. You got to know these other people, and you should know your sheriff, your local law enforcement.
Yep.
But also just take a step back and consider who human beings are. Those people who didn't prepare and didn't think about things. I have no doubt in my mind that this is not the place I want to be if something like that happens, because it'll so quickly turn into, you're going to give us your stuff, or you're going to go into the, whatever happens
into
next.
the stockades with you.
Yep.
By the way, Mark, we're at about 7 minutes away from an hour.
All right. Moving on. So, well, we're doing pretty good actually, because give me a second. Yeah. Cause we're going to skip through Carver. So here, why don't we just do this? And we can maybe go a little bit faster on this because, look, boys and girls, we really do have a game plan. We haven't had anybody come on. Sad. Maybe we'll get you to come on episode 2 when we finish this up. But here's a COCA. You already heard me talk about this. I'm going to pull the slide up full screen so everybody can see it as we just kind of talk over. But again, they're military terms, but you have to think about this. So observation in fields of fire. What does that mean? Well, look at your terrain. If you're driving down the road under your scenario and you've got to get home because, your husband or your wife needs the insulin or the EpiPen or whatever the case is. And if you live in an area where there's lots of mountains or ridge lines, well, that's observation. And it's also fields of fire. You don't want to be, or maybe you do want to be. I'm just throwing this out there. The terrain is going to help dictate whether people can see you and whether people can engage you both in terms of a negative engagement, like shooting at you, or a positive engagement, like dropping an air supply of food, perhaps, right? So you've got to look at that. That's the O in a COCA. It's kind of a weird one. Cover and concealment. Then how that works on the other side. Does the terrain give you the ability, going back to Jeremy's example, nighttime is cover, right? Well, concealment, excuse me. But nighttime provides concealment. Dense vegetation provides concealment. Moving in the open along, I-94 doesn't provide any concealment. And in I-94, well, I guess maybe if there's a bunch of abandoned vehicles, those vehicles provide cover, right? Something that you can not only hide behind, but that's also going to impede somebody else's ability to shoot you, right? And render you harm, right? So these are things that you need to consider because I already know there's people who have been thinking about doing route planning. Oh, here's what I think would happen. This is a high probability event. And so I'm going to be prepared for that. But how many people have actually done their route reconnaissance, their route planning on how they're, whether it's getting home to the family or getting to the next location, right? And because again, all of that stuff dictates your bag, how you're moving, what items you're carrying in your bag. But you got to look at this stuff. And Paul's already given great examples of this. Man-made and natural obstacles. These are things that are inevitably going to happen in a worst case scenario. And here in northern Minnesota, that worst case scenario happened a few years ago. Jeremy probably remembers this. We had a big windstorm and it knocked down trees. It wasn't a tornado, but it knocked down trees all over the place. People were out of, without power for like 7 to 10 days. There's people who couldn't get out of their driveways because of the trees. Those are natural obstacles that can also be duplicated by man. Put a bunch of vehicles in the way, drop some trees, and now there's an obstacle, and now you have to move in a direction that I'm intentionally making you move into. All right, if you come up to an obstacle, if it's natural, you're still going to have to flow around it. Well, when it's man-made, it's designed to make you flow around it because that's where I want you to go so I can kill you. I mean, just a thought. And that might have something to do with what goes in your go bag. We haven't even talked about lethal force or anything like that. Right. And so then on that final note, I'm kind of not really rushing through it, but I'm not sure how much. I'll just finish this and you guys can throw your 2 cents in here. But there's going to be key or decisive terrain along the way. If there's, again, we're here in northern Minnesota, there's lakes all over the place. If you are on the road, you might have to, this road might get into a choke point between 2 lakes, and there's no way around it unless you go 30 miles to the east or west. Well, that's a key piece of terrain. Or in Paul's place, situation, as he already said, there's a hill or a ridge line that dominates. It can see everything. No one can get around it without either being observed. And if it's observation, then it's also fields of fire potentially. So it's a key piece of terrain. It's something that you're going to have to take in consideration in your planning, because if your job or if your thought is, I need to have a go bag that helps me avoid detection. Well, how do you avoid detection? Well, if you're not thinking about the terrain upon which you're currently operating, well, then you're not going to probably avoid detection. So you already have to be doing your map reconnaissance and thinking this stuff through. Where are the key pieces of terrain? And then while that matters for your gears, you might say, well, I could avoid that if I just stayed to the water. Okay, well, then maybe one of your key pieces of gear is learning how to make a poncho raft or having water shoes, because there's a waterway that you can walk through, unlike Paul's waterway, which is like got the Loch Ness monster in the bottom of it. Or you learn how to make a raft, or you cache. You see what I'm kind of getting at? This stuff is vitally important into your decision-making process. And unfortunately, I think it's, in my humble experience, most people haven't even gone beyond that. I'm just going to grab my rucksack and go with my family. So, all right, turn it over to you guys here, because we are kind of getting close to the end, and we're almost at the end. I don't want to go. We're going to go a little bit long, but all right, who wants to go next?
Well, I just want to say one thing about the military terms. I think it's crucial that we, those of me like me that are civilians that never had that experience, understand that terminology so we can work together. There's plenty of people that I have that are friends that were in the military, and obviously I wasn't. My father was, but I wasn't. But it's good to just be able to work together. And honestly, I believe I've shared a few terms with Mark and Redbeard and others that are related to my area. There's so many acronyms out there. Don't let them scare you away. Just say, all right, well, it's not necessarily military. This is just about the overall. This is a go bag. It's a survival situation.
Yep.
Let's just follow because if you go through, forget the acronym, follow the terms and follow what they mean. Then I think it'll be it'll be beneficial for you.
Hey, I just want to throw before we go over to Redbeard. I don't know. I'm getting some of the the back chatter from Spoon over here. Again, I apologize. In order to do this and see, I don't know if you see it. I'm already working a different set of software, but Spoon kind of sent me some messages. I just want to highlight them as we're kind of wrapping this up. So, Mike Dragoo, snipers are a big concern. Well, Roger that, and that's what goes into covering concealment, obstacles, key or decisive terrain. So, look, I don't want to just make it sound like just because you live in the country, you're a great shot, but most people live in the country have at least shot something before. Right. So, I'm here to tell you, it would probably be something in my little bag of tricks. If I was, evil and wanted to prevent something from happening, I would definitely have some, precision marksmanship kind of, events coordinated into my battle plan. But the other one then too, just I wanted to highlight before we come over to you, Redbeard, is, I know I'm thinking this is probably an acronym for Middle Georgia, MIDGA. Sorry if that's Middle Georgia, MIDGA preparedness. I like it. My bug-in plan was to drop trees across the roads that led into his area from the very beginning. Damn right. That's exactly what we're talking about. So that's how you can use the terrain and all these obstacles even. And then when you drop the trees, what are you going to do? You're forcing them to either just avoid you altogether, or they're going to have to try to do that stupid little military obstacle hop thing. And then they're going to be easy targets for, even the Ewoks could come in there and beat them up, or were those Ewoks? What the hell were those stupid little creatures? Yeah. Who could never have destroyed or beat stormtroopers ever. But it's that, or if that, they're going to be easy targets for you and Mike Dragoo, with your precision marksmanship, or they're going to flow off to your flanks. And then that's where you're setting up an ambush. That's exactly the point. So thank you, MidGut preparedness. I just wanted to throw that out there, Redbeard, because Spoon sent those over, and those are actually some good points. I like it.
Yeah. And I will say that everybody has been making fantastic points in the comment section. We do really appreciate that because, again, like we said from the onset of all of this, it takes several minds to kind of hash this stuff out. The only other thing that I kind of want to add to kind of wrap up my end of it anyways is, look, in the end of the day, as you consider whether you're bugging in, whether you're bugging out, whether you're or even if it's not that, but I'm going to come at it from that angle. I can tell you that there was a point in time, and Mark remembers this, when we had a lot of the riots and stuff like that, and I would even say during a particular demic that occurred that shall not be named for the preservation of our videos, but there were considerations that I made, and I had plans set up to leave my house if things got bad enough, but I will tell people that it's not easy sitting down making a plan of leaving everything behind. Like, I don't want anybody to have this idea like, oh, like people who think about this a lot, like it's just easy. Like, it's not. Like, and it's not even a material thing. It's the idea like, this is my home. Like, and the last thing you want to do is leave your home because it's yours, and there's an innate obligation to want to defend it against every single thing. But we're looking at self-preservation here, and in the end of the day, you and your family is more important sometimes than a structure or a certain area that you live in, but it's not an easy choice, and I want people to understand that. So these are decisions that should be weighted.
Hey, just to give you one last little thing, because we're kind of on our way out. Yeah. Carver comes next, and we already know where I'm going to go with that. But to your point, it's not just that this isn't easy. It is a difficult decision. I mean, I don't care if you've been in decisions like this or situations like this, a whole bunch of times deployed. My argument will always be, and I'm not downplaying. Don't anyone take this the wrong way. I'm not saying that combat operations are easy. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it's very different than you're a civilian and you have a family and you've got a completely different set of rules and all these other considerations that somehow take place. When you're on a combat operation and you're leaving the wire, you're leaving the wire and you're on a combat operation. I'm just simply saying, from a decision-making process, it's not that it's easy. It's not as difficult as like, am I really going to and from work every day? And to Jeremy's consideration, do I really want to do this? I don't want to do any of this stuff. I hope it never effing happens. But you still, as an adult, as a mother, as a father, as a rational, individual, for self-preservation, you really need to start thinking about this. And I'm glad, Jeremy, you just said that, because what a great place to start, because everybody just thinks it's a cookie cutter bag and you just throw the same shit in and it works for all these things. That is so far from the truth.
Yeah. And the hardest thing you'll do is, if that day ever comes, Mark, when you actually have to leave your home, I'm going to tell you right now, like I own my own home, right? And that's going to suck if that happens. There's
people in automobile accidents are usually less concerned about their injuries. They're more concerned about their vehicle. That says everything to your point, right there.
Yeah. And it's, and that's the thing. And I guess for me, I mean, it is my home, because it's like you have roots there, you're established, and there is an emotional connection, whether people like it or not. And because, that's it, you spend a good portion of your life at your house. So, so I just want to put that out there so people realize, like, look, like, it's not easy, guys. It's not easy.
Paul, do you want to add anything to what Redbeard and I were just kind of rambling about? Because you know where I'm going with this next thing, and we already kind of talked about this a little bit. So,
I mean, I would say that one of the things and that goes back to mental preparedness. When do you decide to get up and go? When do you stop defending your home? And unfortunately, in situations that are catastrophic, people die because they will not leave their home. And, that decision is very difficult, even if you're completely prepared.
100%.
You may want to be overly, okay, well, let's just go, even though we're not sure, just to be safe. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm a hunker down type of person. So I need to be able to separate that from myself. Yeah. And one other thing I'd like to just mention before we end, at least from my part, is, know your local government. Call your representatives, your local representatives. Okay. Just, you don't have to, discuss anything other than just introduce yourself, meet them, see what they believe in, do that. Keep communications with them. It doesn't have to be, you support them with money or anything. Get to know them. In certain situations, get to know your local sheriff's department. You may not be able to. Depends on where you live. I feel comfortable with that in my area. You may not. Don't do that if you don't feel comfortable. Even if you live in an area, maybe you just don't want to do that. Then that's fine. But the more you know about your local government, the more you know about the support you're going to get in an emergency situation. Where will there be ambulances ready? Will there be police coming out to help you? It's not just you're on your own because there's a disaster, right? We have law enforcement. We have our government that's supposed to help us. Get to know where you are. You may be in a situation where your government is, maybe you live in a high populated area and you're not going to be able to get that help. Then you're on your own, right? So,
well, and thanks for ending it that way. That was going to be my statement, which is, by getting out there and knowing them, you're going to be in a better position to ascertain whether there's going to be any help or you're on your own. And again, we're talking about go bags, gear, and getting there. And that's going to be, you're going to plug that into your decision-making process. And that's going to help you. That's going to put you in a better situation to better understand what type of gear you need, how you're going to go about it, everything we just said. So that was awesome, Paul. Hey, boys and girls, we're getting it's a little over an hour and a half, and we really wanted to keep this at an hour and a half just so everybody can go about their lives. And we're going to do a part 2. But we actually almost nailed it. Looks like we're only like maybe 6 minutes off. But unfortunately, we didn't have any of you join us. But here's where we knew we were going to end it. And I'm not going to go over these next slides, because we literally, what was that? That was 2 podcasts ago, right, Redbeard?
Yep.
We were talking about a different issue. This is over on Mission Critical Podcast. There was 5 of us having this conversation, and Carver came up, And then the next thing you know, we spent half of that podcast and all of the very last podcast talking about Carver, the slide that you see in front of you. So I'm not going to try to relitigate this. And I mean this seriously. This isn't some weird plug to go watch us on Mission Critical Podcast. You can see the slide in front of you. If you think you understand it, good to go. If you don't understand it, maybe just go watch the last podcast. And it's not just me, Paul, and Redbeard. There's two other, smarter people, although my beard was better than theirs and anyone else's. But anyway, we did a podcast and a half on just Carver alone. And I personally threw this in here because I think it's such a valuable tool. And here's the little sneak peek I'm trying to say, or I'm giving you. Again, everybody's thinking this is a military term. This is not. Once you look at this and understand how it works, you'll be able to use this metric and apply it to all the things that you might want to put in your bug out bag or your vehicle. This is a great way to look at critically, take the ego and all that shit out of the equation. Look at a piece of gear. Should I have a water bottle or should I have a canteen? And I'm not joking. You could plug that into Carver, use Carver, and then score it. And you can, you want to score it, like the more points, the worse it is, or the more points, the better it is. It's fine. But you can do that with just something as simple as a water bottle or a pair of boots, or should you have a camp axe or a machete? It really helps kind of answer some of these questions. Yep. We talked about this ahead of time. We're not going to go into it here because, again, that was about 2 hours of conversation in Carver alone. So if you don't get it, watch the other episodes over on Mission Critical Podcast.
Yep.
And again, at the end of the day, you can read. You guys are all adults, but it really helps you identify your needs versus your personal wants. And there even is a category in there for your personal wants. I call it the X factor. Our other guest, Patrick, calls it something different, but it's the same thing. But you can look at it and you can take those X factors, or you can take these personal needs even into consideration when it comes to something like this. So, and then here, this is where I'm just showing this right here. This is where we're going to take the next episode. This is what the next episode is going to focus on. Paul, Redbeard, should we just say it right now? We're going to do the same bat channel, same bat time, 1900 Central next Tuesday.
Yep.
Okay, there it is. So boys and girls, this is what next Tuesday is going to look like, 1900 Central Daylight Time. We're going to go into these things. And again, this is all geared, this conversation is geared towards getting you into thinking, what do you need to put into your bag? Because we haven't even look, I've got a picture up right now. I've got 4 different items. Yep. Full disclosure, I make 2 of those things. I'm Centerline Systems. I don't care what that item is. It has to be designed or structured or tailored to you, the individual, and what you think the crisis is. Again, the probability, the consequences, what you need to accomplish, taking into consideration MET-TC, a COCA, and so many other variables that we haven't even touched on tonight. So if you think you're just grabbing a bag and you're just going to go, you do you, John Wayne. Just tell me where you're going to go so I can be someplace else. All right, fellas. We're at an hour 42. Jeremy, yep. I almost said a minute 42. So for those on Centerline who've never seen the podcast, that's some weird little mental tick. Instead of saying an hour, I say a minute. Maybe it makes me feel better. Jeremy, hour 42. Why don't Paul, closing comments, and Jeremy, you take us out.
Yep.
Paul. No, I thank everyone that did watch tonight, and I'm looking forward to picking up with the next section. I could talk all night about this stuff. So.
Well, I think the next section is going to have a lot that you're going to really bring into, especially on the electronics and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. All right. Paul, thank you, sir. All right. Redbeard, we kind of talked about this before. There's a way for you to tie this all the way back into the beginning slide. Are you ready for it?
I think so. Yeah.
All right. Hey, Redbeard's going to tie us in and do something. I'm just going to say personally, just like Paul did, hey, thanks to everybody who watched. We're just a bunch of knuckleheads. We're trying to share some information, and also have fun with it. I don't know. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. And hopefully next time somebody gets a little bit more outspoken and wants to join us and be a guest on the show, because we're doing this for you guys. Seriously. So, but thank you very much for spending your time and watching tonight. I really do
100%.
appreciate it. All right, Redbeard's going to take us out here.
Yeah. So, guys, gals, look. First off, like Mark said, we really, really appreciate you taking the time to, to stop by and watch what we have to offer. And I just really want to go back on the idea that look, like this whole thing it's very individualistic, right? Like there's a lot of individual nuance. You got to be cognizant of where you are, what you're good at, all of these different variables that we talked about, and basically that we're going to continue this wonderful trip. I love working with these two guys. I really do. And keep it simple, stupid. It doesn't have to be overthought. Go into it with an open mind, and yeah, I mean, that's basically my driver right there is, think of it for yourself, think of it for your environment, think of it for as how it pertains to you and how it's going to create the best outcome possible. Because ultimately that's what matters. So,
and don't forget and your family. And like, I would just, my only personal thing is, again, community. You're like,
get to know your neighbors too.
Yeah.
That helps. That's kind of a big deal.
It doesn't make you a weirdo to have a conversation. So like Big Spoon's here. He lives hours away from me. We've talked about this before. Hey, what would we do if, am I going to be able to make it to you? Would you try to, what would we do? You're not a weirdo. You're not, more importantly, you're not alone. I personally think there's a ton of people who have these conversations with friends and family.
Yeah. And it's
but now,
okay.
Yeah, but I don't want to make it too serious. I just got to end it on one last note. Spoon just sent me another, private chat. Apparently tacos are back into the conversation out there in the chat. I have no idea. I don't know what tacos had to do with anything tonight. I apologize.
Hey, if y'all have taco trucks and you're bugging out in a taco truck, you better stop at my house, because I'm on board with that.
Hey, you got mobility, you got food. I've seen some zombie movies. You can turn them into zombie killing machines.
Right.
So a taco truck wouldn't be bad.
Yeah.
All right,
good apocalypse.
Redbeard, do you want to take everybody out on our Mission Critical podcast out? I mean, well, here, let's come over to Paul. Paul, any final comments, sir?
No, I'm good. Redbeard, go ahead and take us out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on that note, everybody, and this is probably one of my favorite portions of the show. Look, the flame of liberty will not and shall not ever be extinguished so long as there are good people out there that are willing to support and defend it. And that means you. And as Mark always says in the beginning of our Mission Critical podcast, if you're listening to this, you are the resistance. This befalls you guys. So that being said, look, we really enjoy it. I had a great time. I'm sure these two guys did too. And can't wait to see you on the next one.
One of the best Tuesday nights ever. See you next Tuesday, 1900 Central Time. All right, everybody. Thanks. Be good. Woo!